If you missed it in the morning, here is the best of the Big Breakfast on Racing Radio.
Time for Racing with the Stars. Absolute pleasure this morning to catch up with one of our great friends here on the program. Josh Shortte, many of our listeners would know him for his tipping deeds over the years. He has been a wonderful ambassador for the sport of racing, and it's great to have him on the Big Breakfast this morning as our Racing with the Stars special guest. Good morning, Joshy.
Good morning, Shorty. Wes? That was about my time, the 90s. Actually got a funny story about Guns N' Roses and their concert at Calder Park, which relates a little bit to racing.
Go ahead. Let's open up the batting with a bit of Gunners action.
Okay, I might get a few of my years mixed up here with a few of these horse stories, but it would have been the early 90s. The William Reid Stakes used to be run on the Australia Day weekend at Moonee Valley. Anyway, I think in this year it was in the high 30s, like 38 degrees, 37 degrees. So we go out to the William Reid. We're really keen on one, on a horse called Spanish Mix. The hot favourite in the race was Scalacci, and of course everyone would know Scalacci. He was a magnificent sprinter, and he went round, I think, in the red, tomato sauce. And Spanish Mix was about in its mid 25 to 1, and it was when it was trained up in New South Wales, not by John Hawkes, it was with someone else. And Alan Scorse rode the horse. Of course, you'd know him from Johnny Scorse's brother, of course, who rode Placid Arc. Anyway, we went out to Moonee Valley, so it would have been about 17 or something, so not legal to bet yet. A couple of the boys were 18 already and had a car, so we went out to the races. We backed Spanish Mix, 25 to 1, got the cash. Got a call from the Guns N' Roses concert saying they've run out of water here and there's no fresh water. So 38 degrees, I think Skid Row played before, Sebastian Bach, he played before, and then Guns N' Roses were on and they had no water, 38 degrees at Calder Park. Oh. So we came up with the idea, we got the cash from Spanish Mix, let's go and buy a whole lot of water, like crates of water, and go out and start selling them out the front of the Calder Park Raceway while Guns N' Roses on. So I don't know how many people were there, but there would have had to have been 30, 40, 50,000. We were selling bottles of water. We started at $5. We ended up going to $10 a bottle and made a fortune selling water at the Guns N' Roses concert. So we could hear a bit of Axl making a profit, and we'd have made a profit at the track.
Oh, what a fill-up. Talk about entrepreneurial skills.
So I'm just going to look up on my computer. It would have been, where are we? 1993, William Reid Stakes. Spanish Mix beat Scalacci by a lip of 25, and then we got the money at the Guns N' Roses selling water.
You just did something that the venues normally do themselves.
Exactly. Well, that was before, bottled water was a big thing. Don't worry, we went down to Campbell's Cash and Carry out the back of Footscray, bought it, and then made the rush out to Calder Park. Very profitable.
How much were you paying per bottle?
Oh, it would have been like 50 cents.
Oh,
fortune.
Decent markup.
Yeah, it's in my blood,
It is, isn't it? Oh, that's outstanding. Well, that's a great start to things. And the start of the story, finding one at 25 to 1, it's something that you've always been good at, Josh, being able to isolate a winner at odds. How did your love for racing kick off? Tell us a little bit about it.
Love for racing, well, it's another long story. It goes back to my very young age. My grandfather used to be involved in illegal casinos in Melbourne. So in the old days, there was no gambling in Melbourne legally. So there was no casino, there was no pokies. So if you wanted to play cards or have a bet, you usually had to do it, or even, SPs, all that sort of stuff were big. So my grandfather lived in St Kilda, and the family moved to St Kilda probably at around that age. I used to go to his card club before school around 6 a.m. with my father and clean the club. So it was like Goodfellas. I had about 42 uncles, and I used to fill the fridge with cold meats, bottles of scotches in the cupboard. The lawyer's truck would come with soft drink mixers that I'd load up. I'd clean all the ashtrays. Sometimes they'd still be playing cards, to be frank. But they always had the trots on, and they always had the races on, and they were always gambling. My grandfather always used to give me a smack over the head and say, see what they're doing, they're gambling. Always bet what you can afford to lose. You don't want to end up being a loser like these guys. So he was always smacking me over the head. But one day, I started hooking up with some kids double my age. So I would have been about 6. And I hung out with these 12-year-olds that went to Caulfield. We're going to Caulfield all the time. So we crawled under the fence. It would have been the 1982 Blue Diamond. Rancher won it. And I snuck under the fence with these older kids, and I just loved it. The thunder of the hooves, the horses, the big crowd, the cash, the fashion, the whole thing, loved it. And from there I was bitten. So crawling under the fence when I was 6 at Caulfield, and I'm still here at Caulfield. So That's where it started.
Unbelievable. Turned a complete circle, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, so I was always, told to treat it responsibly. My parents weren't big fans of me. I used to have to hide the form guides under my bed. We had bunks at home with my brother. We shared a room. We had a trundle. Remember the old trundles that used to go under the bed where you kept your toys and blankets? Yeah. Well, I used to hide my form guides under there because so Mum and Dad couldn't see them. And that was from about the age of 7 or 8 years old.
Goodness me.
Yeah, so I've been reading the form a long time, and another guy that contributed to your show, Ralphie Horowitz, well, he was a punter, and his parents were punters, and I used to go to the races with them, and used to go around in the afternoons on a Saturday, and the races used to be on free-to-air on Channel 7 with Keith Hillier and Roy Higgins, and used to watch the races with Ralphie, and he used to work down the stables for Angus Armanasco. So that's when I started working at the stables and got a job with Rob McGuinness and did a bit of work with Angus. And had some real good fun with that.
Unbelievable, and of course incredible to think that you've both now made a career out of your great passion. We spoke to Ralphie in this segment going back probably 3 months ago now, and the thing that really comes through from the pair of you is that from a young age there's been just a real passion for the industry.
Yeah, love it, and we're both, local. Well, I was St Kilda, he was Caulfield, but, St Kilda's on the border of Caulfield, both local boys, and I think that's the great thing about having a racetrack in a city. It's a bit disappointing these days that probably you don't have the stables off track here at Melbourne, and you probably don't have the kids getting that experience with racing, and I think that's because of the way racing's been portrayed down that gambling line, and racing's obviously so turnover reliant now that a lot of people with the gambling side of things, like I just explained to my parents, didn't want me to go to the races or get involved because of the gambling. So it's quite an obstacle for racing, and I think once people realise that there's more to racing than gambling, it's exciting. It's a great social experience. They're beautiful animals. It's an exciting sport. And, I just think there's more to it and it needs to be sold that way.
Yeah, so true. Every industry has positives and negatives, and gambling at times has always had that, I suppose, negative moniker, but for the wrong reasons, Josh. Bottom line is, gambling can be so much fun, and you've touched on it initially, the fact that if you've got it under control, spend what you can afford to spend, but enjoy it, because it is an enjoyable pastime. There is nothing that beats gambling. The excitement, the thrill, it is just a wonderful pastime.
Oh yeah, some of my great moments with punting stories. I mean, but the thing is, like I tell all my mates that I've got probably half a dozen sheds and horses. They're very small, but I don't hunt. I don't own a boat. I'm no good at golf. I tried. I don't fish. So my pastime is, catching up with friends, having a punt, racing a few horses and having a few drinks, and I love it. And the people I've met over the years, and Australia-wide, internationally through racing, they're friends for life. So it's a great industry.
You're spot on, and it's just got to be treated as a hobby. I think your grandpa hit it on the head when he said, as long as you treat it responsibly, it can be a lot of fun, and that's the way that you've got to approach it. But most people's hobbies can cost an awful lot of money. Whatever they're into, collecting shoes, when it comes to a lot of the ladies, a lot of their pastime is going shopping, and that isn't exactly a cheap pastime itself either. So it's a matter of finding basically a bit of a happy medium, and as you said, make it part of your life. It's a social experience. You meet a lot of great people, and the thrill that goes with it, either in ownership, as you touched on, or having a nice collect, be it a quaddie or a trifecta or whatever it is. They are days that really stand out in your life as highlight moments.
Oh, yeah, it's amazing. It's like anything in life. You've got to find a balance, and once you do, it's away you go.
Josh, I always look at it this way as well. I get as much excitement out of winning as losing. And when I'll just preface that by saying some of the horses that don't win that could have provided you with the greatest results, if it's been a close finish, you get so much of a thrill knowing that your judgment has been very close to the mark, albeit you haven't won, but at the same point in time, you've gone that close to winning, and there is such a thrill there as well.
Oh, there is. That goes back to one of my punting stories. My father, he's not a punter at all, but it was when the big sixes came in Melbourne, and there was a race at Caulfield. It was probably Caulfield Guineas Day, so the Herbert Power, the race that qualifies you for the Caulfield Cup, it was that day, and I took a big six for my dad, and we spent like $12 each, and I actually nailed the first 5 legs. I don't know how. It would have been mid-90s, 95 or something. Anyway, we had the first 5 legs, and we were the only 50-cent unit alive to win like $2.5 million.
Oh.
Anyway, at that stage, so 95, I would have been, 19 or something. I had no money to save. And I actually hadn't worked out how to do anything of that. So I rang my dad, and my dad's driven up to Caulfield from home and said, Dad, we're alive in the Big Six. The last race was, in those days, was called the Quickies. And we had a horse one out called Fewer Chosen, and Larry Cassidy was on it. Anyway, it had the old Tommy Smith colours, the blue and green stripes. Looked home for all money and got nailed right on the line by Unsolved, I think of Jimmy Houlihan. And our horse was 20-1, Gay Waterhouse trained. It got beaten a lip. The photo finish in those days, you had to wait for the developed prints. So I don't know if you remember Trotter and Let It Ride, which is my favourite film. If any of the listeners haven't seen it and you're into racing, you've got to see it. But I had my hands on each white rail of the fence with my face between the rails on my knees, waiting for that number. Anyway, we got beat. But it was one of the greatest thrills of all time. My dad and I probably one of our, we're close, but it was one of our closer moments, rushing up in the car to give me a cuddle. And
5 out of 6, geez, that's pretty close. I think 5 out of 6 is actually a result, though, isn't it? Do you get something for 5 out of 6?
Yeah, they used to have like a sub-dividend, so we got something, but it wasn't massive at the time. But I was working at the Truth newspaper at the time as a journalist, and they actually wrote a story on it. It was a pretty big thing because no one had got the Big Six yet. It was just in its early days, and it was quite a. There you go, Louise. Could have been rich, and could have been a contender. The old Marlon Brando.
Yeah, exactly. I love those stories. It's just a shame at times they don't have happy endings. But the beauty is, Josh, we live to fight another day, and that next big win, we certainly do appreciate. Tell us about the time at the Truth.
Leading from, obviously experience of working around the stables, I tried to ride, kept falling off, and Angus Nasco and a couple of other trainers said, don't bother, try and find something else. I think it was more fear, and I think that's what people don't realise, that these jockeys and track riders and, jumps jockeys and what they are risking every time they go on a horse, you've got to be, it's verging on extreme sports, and I just wasn't, up to it, so decided to not get my hands dirty. And it was actually when I was at Rob McGuinness's, I think that was when Jason Brown came over and did a stint of an apprenticeship with Rob. There's some good horses there like Fancy Bird and Pike, and Jason Brown was over for a little while. From there, I sort of wanted to get into the media. So my teacher at school, Johnny Locko, was the mayor of Brighton, had a lot of contacts, got me into community radio. So I had my own community radio show over here on racing from about the age of 15 or 16. And then from there, met some contacts in the media, met Greg Miles and worked on the ABC as a tote dividend caller, because in the old days when you weren't in the metro area, you had to tune into the racing through the ABC. So the footy would be on and they'd go straight out to Greg Miles and I at the races, and we, televised the Daily Double or the feature races. So from there, I met the editor of The Truth at the time, who was Ron Taylor, one of the legends of journalism here racing journalism here in Australia. And I started there as a casual and ended up doing a cadetship in journalism with The Truth, which was quite an interesting experience, because when I went in there, it was the halcyon days of The Truth were just ending. Mark Day had gone broke, and the place had gone into receivership. But they were still heavily reliant on escort agency ads and exotic massages and all that sort of stuff, and the Page 3 girls.
And you weren't writing in hard palm at all, were you?
Yeah, I had to a couple of times. It's time to step up to the plate and write about all those sexual fantasies you always had.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, peeping over the fence at the hot next-door neighbour and invited over for a cup of tea, all that sort of stuff.
I can remember when I was a teenager, Josh, and reading The Truth and going... there was form, there was everything you needed in The Truth. I thought it was a very good publication, but the first thing you'd go to was Hard Palm.
Yeah, Hard Palm, and had the Page 3 girl, and the biggest part of the paper was the court reports. So we had these 3 journalists that all they did was rove around the courts looking for the quirkiest, weirdest crimes. And, there was some strange stuff. Front pages about, Kylie Minogue seen in a UFO. You know, they'd be the lead stories and things like that. But like, I remember sometimes it'd be like a Wednesday night, and in those days, obviously, there was no email or anything like that. I'd have to wait around the races for the stewards report, catch a train back to North Melbourne, because the offices were behind Festival Hall in Roslyn Street, West Melbourne, sorry. And so I'd have to go in, type up the whole stewards report, word by word, and then it'd get put in the paper the next day. But while I'd be in there, you'd have madams knocking at the door saying, you know, with an envelope of cash, can I still get my ad in the paper? So I'd have to step up to the plate. And, yeah, it was quite an experience for like a 17, 18-year-old kid. But I learned a lot, and learned how to drink there, because journalists, wow. Yeah, those stints down at the local pub at Spencer and stuff were a very unique experience.
Just before we move on, the truth, their racing form was sensational.
Yeah, well, that was my main task, was to put together the form guide. And I actually came over and covered an Inter-Dominion for the truth. I knew nothing about trots. They said, Josh, you're going to Perth. And it was the Inter-Dominion that young Mr. Charles won. Frank Scaravilli, the owner, I think, drove it. And I think it was Richard Hancock trained it. Whereas you probably remember more than me, but yeah, young Mr. Charles, I don't know what year it would have been, but I went over and covered. That was my first time in Perth.
96, I think it was.
Yeah, so I was there for like a week covering the Inter-Dominion, so that was exciting. But yeah, so I learned a lot. Obviously, you had to step up to the plate. No matter what it was, whether it was riding up, trots or racing. So.
Unbelievable. What a great grounding for you, Josh. And from there, you went on to a host of different roles, and at one stage, you were the jockey manager for the pumper, Jimmy Cassidy.
Yeah, well, I met Jimmy. I became very friendly with Simon Marshall through a jockey. The first jockey I ever managed was Andrew Finlay, and we had a lot of success. He was like in the top 2 leading apprentices in Victoria. So him and Brett Preble would be fighting out the Apprentice of the Year awards. And Andrew introduced me to Simon, and Simon was in at the end of his career, but used to, help him waist and lose weight and things like that. And Simon introduced me to Jimmy, and got to know Jimmy. Actually went to Perth for a wedding. It was actually the wedding of Pluck a Duck. My mate used to be the man inside Pluck a Duck. And went over there for a wedding, and Jimmy was over there riding St Clemens Bell in the Fruit and Veg and Railway. And so Jimmy and Vicky now his wife, we became friendly over there, got to know each other, spent a lot of time together. And from there I started managing Jimmy at the end of 1999, the start of 2000. Was with Jimmy for about 5-6 years. We had a lot of success. I moved to Sydney and spent time up there with Jimmy, and I learned a lot. Jimmy was a great man. You can't buy experience, and he's just been at the top level of his sport for, over 30 years now, and we're still good friends. And, through that time of travelling, like I said, racing, you meet so many people. And that trip to Perth, I met the Noskis and Karen Kersley and Paul Dyson and some great people over there that are still friends now, and, great racing people.
How did you end up in Perth?
Well, that was permanently with love. And my heart took me there. But from about 2000, when I went over there with Jimmy and Umrum, which was another amazing experience, because I saw the beginning of the Northerly story. Jimmy was over there with Umrum, quite confident we could take out the Railway Stakes, and after some success in the spring here in Melbourne with the Toorak victory, we went over there, and Jimmy's in front jogging. I think he'd won the Lee Steer Stakes, and suddenly this horse gives him windburn at about the 600 metre mark. It might have even been the 800 metre mark, and Jimmy came back after the race, after Northerly had spaced them, and said, Josh, we've run into a champion. And I think old Comrade ran second, so it was a vintage Railway. But from that time, my relationships with a lot of the local racing people who I've mentioned, like the Noskis and the Kersleys and Paul Dyson, good mates, that from there we became friendly, and I used to travel over there every summer. So I'd hire a car and drive down to Albany and Esperance and drive up north and do all the touristy things around WA by myself. And from there, I got a phone call. I think it was Karrakatta Plate Day. It would have been 2007. Roman Time won the race for the Kersleys, and Paul Dyson rang me. I'd just done a punters club at a local TOB in Melbourne, and he said, Josh, I've got your future wife here. I'll put her on the phone. Never spoken to her before. And he put Talia Mahor on the phone, and we spoke, and from there we stayed in contact. I was going overseas at the time, during the winter. Still did my trip overseas. And when I got back, I said to the parents, I said, we're driving to Perth together. It's going to meet the love of my life. So from there, Talia and I moved over at the end of 2007. And another good relationship I built over in Perth was with Marty Young through Jimmy Cassidy. And Marty gave me a great opportunity at Perth Racing, which I'll never forget, because that's got me where I am now today at Caulfield. So from there, Talia and I were in Perth for probably, what would it have been, 3 years, and loved my time in Perth. And, just in the end, I love racing, and that's the way I operate. And over there, I tried to do that in my time at Perth Racing, and that's what I'm trying to do here is, spread the joy of racing.
Well, I know firsthand you're a number one operator, top class operator, and obviously that came to the fore with Talia, a blind date, and it just worked magnificently.
Yeah, it was Anzac weekend when I first flew over to Perth to meet Talia in 2007. And, it was love at first sight. It sounds a bit corny, but you get off the plane at this story, but you get off the plane at Perth, and I'd never met Talia. Obviously seen photos and things and been spoken on Skype, but the top of the stairs there at Perth Airport, it was packed, and I could just see Talia's smiling face. She just stood out, walked down the stairs, I went straight up to her and gave her a big kiss. So that's how it started.
Amazing.
So, started with a bang, and we hope... Now we're married, we want the bang to continue our whole lifetime, and obviously the addition of Matan now, I couldn't be in a better place.
Amazing. And of course, importantly, since you've moved back, the start of a family, but a great job, and that's continuing to go from strength to strength over there, Josh. Obviously, it's the racing mecca, it's the sports mecca of the world, really, over there in Melbourne. But for you to have your job out there at Caulfield now, where you're doing a great job, we heard yesterday about the Blue Diamond noms closing, and the biggest races of the year up there on the calendar, the Caulfield Cup, the Blue Diamond, some of the great racing events in world sport, and you're there front and square as a big part of it all. It must be tremendous to know that all the hard work's paid off.
Yeah, in one easy saying, I'm living the dream and loving it. Obviously, I want to keep stepping up, and obviously my goals are to keep stepping up, and I'd love to experience racing in Asia. That would be a great experience. So once I've done my time here, and I want to keep learning about the operational side of running big events, and I feel if I can do that, that'll allow me to probably step up to a big stage, even something like the dream is Hong Kong or even Singapore, as the next step in my apprenticeship in racing. So looking forward to it. And
you will achieve. I can tell everybody listening in, Shorty, that he will get to the top. There's no shadow of a doubt, because the one thing that you do everything properly, Josh, and you don't take the shortcuts, you get the job done.
Well, that's another thing I was always taught by my grandfather. My grandparents went through a very, probably an awful time in history, and I asked a lot of questions about it, World War II and how the Jewish people were treated, and it's really steeled me and given me resolve. But basically, you've got to believe in yourself, and you've got to live life with common sense and treat people how you want to be treated. And the Jewish race went through a bad time, and we're the steely for it. And I thank my grandparents a lot for who I am now.
That's a good philosophy to live by, that is for sure and certain, Josh. And your grandpa, interesting character, the illegal casinos that all continued on. Is there a favourite punting story? We've heard some rippers today about the crates of water and the big miss on the big six. Is there one that actually came off that you remember as one of your great moments from a punt perspective, because you found so many winners for our listeners over the years? Is there a day that springs to mind that you look back on and think, geez, it's great when the actual plan all comes off?
Yeah, there's some great stories. Probably the greatest would have to be, I did explain earlier that my parents weren't gamblers at all, but there was one day, it was 1995, and Flying Spur had run disappointingly in the Blue Diamond after winning a Blue Diamond Prelude, and everyone thought that the horse was going to go run in the sires and go to the paddock. And at that time, I used to go to Flemington track work, and Gerald Ryan was training for David Moody. Of course, David Moody, you'd know the colours that go around with a lot of Peter Moody and Matty Allen's horses now. He was part owner of Flying Spur with Arrowfield. And at the time, the horse was going to the paddock, and obviously there's no social media or anything like that, so it was quite easy for, connections to change plans and do things without punters knowing. And I was at the track one morning, and everyone was chatting about Flying Spur, and Gerald had mentioned to me, Josh, this horse is not going to the paddock. It's up at, I think the story was it was up at Arrowfield, or was at a pre-training property, and it was still ticking over, and they were going to go to the Golden Slipper. And I love the horse, Flying Spur, still do. I think he was a really probably forgotten horse. Probably didn't see the best of him because he was retired to stud early, and he's doing a great job at stud. But at the time, pre-post betting wasn't that popular, so I found it hard to get on and find an early market for the Golden Slipper. So I rang up Colin Tidy, who was betting on the Golden Slipper early, and I didn't have a credit card, and I had to have a credit card to put the bet on. So I went up to my dad, and I said, Dad, I know you hate me punting, but I reckon this horse will win the Golden Slipper. And he goes, but it's not on for like a month or 5 weeks. I said, I'm telling you to win the Golden Slipper. I said, I've got $500 that I want to put on it. Anyway, he said, $500, you're kidding me? Rah, 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 started carrying on. I said, Dad, I'm telling you it'll win. So he goes, are you sure? And I said, yes. He goes, all right, I'll let you put it on my credit card. So no worries. So I rang up Colin Tidy. I said, this is my dad's credit card. My dad was there. My dad goes, put another 500 on it. So
he chimed in.
Yeah, he chimed in at the last 100 metres. So the horse wasn't in the market. So I said, Colin, give me a price then. He said, all right, I'll give you 33 to 1. So we had 500 each way at 33 to 1. And the horse ended up, obviously, Jimmy Cassidy was going to ride the horse, and at the time, obviously, I didn't know Jimmy, but I wake up on the Saturday morning and all over the papers is the jockey tapes. Gavin Eads, Jimmy Cassidy, Kevin Moses, disqualified, not riding for 3 years. And my dad said, this is a crap industry. I told you, they're all crooks, they're criminals. He's going off and he'll come at 500. And I was like nervous. I'm thinking the pumper's off the horse. What are we going to do? Because I thought the pumper, he was flying at the time. This unknown jockey from Queensland gets booked for it, Glenn Boss. Never heard of him. My dad's going, we're gone. Anyway, it was a hot slipper. I think Strategic, Octagonal, Millrich, all ran in the race. Al Maskey. Anyway, I was playing footy at the time, and my girlfriend at the time, I got her to park my car on the wing, because on the suburban footy ground you could park your car on the wing. The slipper was going to be run like during the last quarter. So I was playing under 19s, and I tipped it to all the seniors that were going to play away from home. And the coach is saying, now everyone's got to concentrate. I know you've all backed this horse in the slipper. Rah, 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 rah. Anyway, in the last quarter, we were 5 points down, and the runner's coming out going, concentrate. Anyway, I was a bit of a on-baller and a bit of a leader on ball. So I got the ruckman to switch play to the other side of the ground for a boundary throw-in. So my missus turned the big stereo up to full blast with Ian Craig. So this local suburban ground, full blast subwoofers, was the Golden Slipper of 1995. Anyway, Flying Spur bursts up the fence, wins, the unknown jockey, 33 to 1. I'm on the field playing footy, the whole of our team's jumping up and down like we won a grand final, and at the time we're down by a goal. Anyway, the horns are tooting around the ground. Anyway, the horse won, we got the cash, we ended up getting up and winning the footy, and then that night at the club was obviously huge. All the seniors came back on the team buses with slabs and hanging out the window, Flying Spur, and we got the cash, and Dad was, obviously goes, Josh, you're a freak.
What an incredible result. That's one you'll never forget, Joshy.
And Dad kept the money and helped buy my first property, a little flat with that, and they helped make the payments, obviously, until I had a proper job, and so I've still got that flat down there in East St Kilda.
Unbelievable. Magnificent. Josh, I'd love to have you on for longer to hear more, because I'm sure there are many more of them. We'll hit you up over a drink in the coming years to hear more about it. Thanks so much for joining us this morning here on the Big Breakfast on Racing Radio. It's been one of the more entertaining Racing with the Stars we've ever had. To yourself, Talia, Matan and the rest of the family, wish you continued success heading forward.
Yeah, well, the family's coming over on Thursday for a week, so I'm looking forward to heading back to the west and seeing all the family. So we'll be at Belmont Races on Saturday, and love to catch up and have a beer with anyone that's there, so don't hesitate to come up and say hello. I'll be floating around.
Beautifully done, Josh. All the best.
Thanks. Good luck and good punting to all the listeners.
Good on you, Josh. Josh Shortte here on the Big Breakfast on Racing Radio.
Listen for more from 6 a.m. on Racing Radio.